Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Machette, and we are the Astrology Star Sisters doing the new moon forecast for Aries 2026. And I want to welcome my friend and fellow astrologer, Madam Simon. Welcome, Simon. How are you today?
Great, Liz. How are you?
Good, good. Ready to do the new moon,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is just around the corner. So, Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, visionary artist, and her website is iconalchemy.com. I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive, and tarot reader, and my website is alightpath.com. And today we're talking about the Aries new moon, and I'm going to let Simon tell you about her piece of art that she added today.
Oh, well, thank you, Liz. So, one of the forms of art that I very much enjoy is photography, and another is photo manipulation, playing around with the photographs that I have taken. So, um, that is what I did in this case. This is a photo manipulation of mine, and I liked the fiery Aries colors. Thought it was appropriate for this new moon.
And new moons are about new beginnings and fresh starts. And would you like to add anything to that?
Well, it kind of sets the tone um, for the whole lunation. The lunation being, the period from new moon to new moon. Okay. Um, and so, whatever's going on at the new moon, we can kind of take that as a way to sort of seed our activities for that lunation. Um, for some people, there is a very conscious process of intention setting. For others, like myself, it's more of a I meditate on the themes of the new moon, and if they happen to align with something I want to do during that month, then I'm going to be paying attention to those influences.
Thank you for sharing that. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Aries. Um, Aries is a cardinal sign, it initiates, creates, begins new projects. It's the start of the zodiac and the astrological year. The ruling planet is Mars. The element is fire, about energy, will, determination, desire, passion, excitement, adventure. And the mantra is I am. And Simon, can you lead us through the keywords and cautions?
Sure. So Aries relates to our identity, our individuality. Um, Also, it's associated with independence, initiative. It can be considered pioneering, brave, courageous, charismatic, active, athletic, competitive, executive, and has this pedal to the metal kind of quality. Some of the cautions are being aggressive, temperamental, controlling, impulsive, and foolhardy. I felt it was very important to add that last one there because Aries, of course, is known for throwing caution to the wind. And while certainly that can sometimes be perceived as courageous, real courage is when we do things while still actually knowing what it is we're doing and what the consequences might be. Whereas Aries sometimes doesn't pay attention to those things. So,
Sometimes they jump before they think or anything.
yeah.
The new moon is on April 17th at 4:52 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. This is the chart for the Seattle area, which would be pretty accurate for the whole west coast of the United States. And we have that sun and moon at 27 degrees of Aries in 28 minutes, and it's conjoining Chiron and Eris. Do you want to talk about that conjunction, all of that in Aries right there? We have a lot of planets in Aries, but the moon and sun are really close to that Chiron and Eris, so I thought we'd start there.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got quite a pileup going on in Aries right now. And So that gives this kind of immediate quality to all of their themes, to all of the planetary archetypes. In this particular case, I've talked before about on this show about the Chiron-Eris conjunction. Chiron was in Greek mythology was a teacher to heroes. It was well versed in herbal studies, pharmacopoeia, medicine, and is today very much associated with holistic forms of medicine, or traditional forms like acupuncture. Okay. But of course, Chiron is also known as the wounded healer. Most famously for the wound he sustained from an arrow tipped with Hydra's blood poison that gave him a wound that was impossible even for somebody with his profound level of skill to heal. But it should also be remembered, especially when we're looking at Chiron and Aries, that Chiron had an earlier wound, a wound to his identity, in the sense that he was rejected by both of his parents. He was the product of an affair. His mother was a nymph who, when she saw this half horse creature come out of her, was not too thrilled. And his father was also in denial of its existence. And so Chiron in Aries in particular has been showing us wounds that are associated with identity, and wounds that relate to our ability to do things as individuals. Okay. A lot of us have been learning kind of the hard way that we cannot simply go it alone, that, humans are social animals, and we need to find ways to reconnect, to sort of band together in order to deal with some of our problems. But what makes that much harder are, of course, things like toxic masculinity, the kind of bootstrapping ethos, particularly in the United States, which has been going through its Chiron return. Okay. And so there can be this kind of tendency when we're looking at chironic wounds, they're not things that are going to be, that we can just kind of wave a magic wand and solve. And a lot of times they are things that will never be solved, right? Chiron can't make his mother and father love him. Okay. And everybody who has a wounding surrounding identity, that's not something that goes away, just like that, right? Even though there are certainly people who will, try to convince you, let's say you're gay. There's lots of people who are going to try to convince you that that's just a lifestyle choice as opposed to a part of who you truly are. Okay. And so that's a real conundrum then to try to deal with that. Okay. Because, being gay itself is not necessarily the problem. It's how are you being identified by that? And how are other people responding to that identity? And how have you internalized injuries surrounding that? Okay. So that would be all well and good. Tough to deal with, but, on its own, okay, we can try to sit with those things. We can try to acknowledge that, yeah, this is something I don't really know what to do about, or I don't know how to make it have less of a challenging impact on my life. But, slowly but surely over time, we manage to figure things out in terms of how we're going to deal with that. But with Eris, Eris is, of course, the goddess of discord. And she is all about disrupting the status quo and tends to like to stir the pot just for the sake of stirring it up, right? And get people quarreling amongst each other. But she's also really about, very loudly pointing out the things that hurt. In this particular case, when she's conjoining Chiron, she's like, oh, you say you're going to like sit here and like suffer in silence over this. I don't think that's appropriate. Hey, y'all over here, take a look at this. This is hurting really bad. And you're like, oh no, don't anybody look. Right? Okay. So that's really rough, right? Because we want we want to be able to, kind of muddle our way through our lives and manage to perhaps not draw a whole lot of attention to the areas where we feel weak in particular. Aries does not like to have its weaknesses pointed out. Okay. And one of the things that we've also seen with this Chiron-Eris conjunction is this strong tendency to overcompensate, right? So, this is where we've seen a lot of chest thumping on the world stage. Okay, I'm not weak. Here, let me show you how strong I am. Often kind of putting our feet in it in the process. So with this new moon conjoining that combination, then remember that the new moon starts the lunar cycle. So for the 4 weeks, okay, of the moon going from new moon to new moon, themes that connect with the Chiron-Eris conjunction in Aries, themes that connect with wounds to our identity, with perhaps struggles with executive function. All the people who ended up with long COVID, for example, challenges to executive function have been part of that. Okay. Or, people feeling like they're being judged for their identities or that they're not sure who they are at this point in time. With so many challenging things going on in society, some of us may have identified very strongly with one particular group or one particular ethos, and now we may be questioning that, wondering if that really is who we are and what we want to be associated with. Okay. So those are all possibilities. And of course, since Aries is associated with a warlike quality, it's ruled by Mars, a god of war. Okay. Then that brings questions about conflict. How do we address conflict? Do we have the means to adequately resolve conflict? It's interesting, I've been doing some reading on Mars lately since we're in Aries season. And Mars, while he is, he's the Roman god of war, and he's conflated with the Greek god of war, Ares, Ares. Okay. The attitudes toward those gods were actually very different. Ares as a war god is considered to be, this kind of disruptor and, kind of maybe a bit of a bungler, like why do you have to, create all this conflict? Why do you have to, disrupt our peace, right? But Mars was considered to be a protector. Okay. Mars is who, establishes, these are my people and I'm going to take care of them. This is my space and I'm going to take care of it. Okay. And so part of that means that a good god of war is also capable of deciding when the war is done. Right? And so I very much suspect that questions around, you know, how do we address conflict and what are the limits of our willingness to fight, especially when, let's face it, war does lots of damage to people and not just the people who are being assaulted, right? There's that spiritual damage done. How much of a taste for blood do you have? Okay. So yeah, I think all of those things are going to come up during this lunation. And so this new moon, for those of us who actually do like to do intention setting or who wish to meditate on these themes and apply them consciously in our lives during this lunation, then we can consider what's worth fighting over and how long do we actually wish to carry on the fight? And what's it going to take out of us? And how are we going to identify ourselves as we, kind of butt heads like rams? Aries symbol is the ram. And it is that season, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, of, rams clunking heads together. How long do we want to keep it up?
Thank you. That was great. Okay, we're going to go to some aspect patterns. We have a minor grand trine with Pluto and Juno sextile Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune. And Uranus is also sextile to all of those. And then Uranus is trine to Pluto and Juno, making up that minor grand trine or talent trine. Go ahead.
Sure. So, the Pluto-Juno conjunction that is applying, Juno's applying to a conjunction with Pluto, definitely brings up themes of how does institutional power affect the social fabric? How does it affect our commitments? How does wealth and privilege warp our social relationships? Okay. Our institutionalized relationships. Juno, of course, is she's queen of heaven. She is the partner to the wife of Jupiter. Okay. And we know mythologically he's known for being something of a philanderer. She continues to keep up her relationship with him, though, because it is part of what establishes the cosmic order. Okay. What establishes the social order. And so, she kind of reels him back in at times and says, okay, really, this is too much. You've gone too far. But she is still committed to the relationship. And so that ultimately is what Juno is about, is that commitment. And, what promises do we make? How do we keep them? And particularly on a societal level, which anytime you're dealing with an outer planet like Jupiter, you're dealing with transpersonal themes and therefore societal themes, right? There is this question of, Pluto likes to show us what's rotten, right? What is in need of transformation, of composting, and then being transformed into something that in turn becomes empowering. But we often start out with this sense of disempowerment when we're looking at Pluto, right? Pluto confronts us with our control issues, and reminds us where our impression of, that we can have control over a situation might in fact be an illusion. Okay. So this conjunction of Pluto and Juno then is really bringing to a head the questions about the social fabric, the social contract. Okay. How can you have a society and the social contract by which that society operates if, the rich and powerful are doing their thing and everybody else are the ones who are abiding by the rules, right? Okay. So yeah, I think that's at the core of that conjunction, and that then in turn, through this minor grand trine, is coloring all of these other planetary themes, all of these other archetypes. The most powerful influence, of course, going on here is with that trine to Uranus. And Uranus is all about change, and rebellion and liberation. But also, remember, when we're looking at a trine, there is this flow between the planets involved. Okay, so they're in cahoots together. So who's being liberated? That's a big question here. Okay, who is finding their freedom? Who is transforming the rules in order to gain liberty? It doesn't necessarily mean it's the good guys. Okay. So, which doesn't mean that the good guys can't utilize this energy. I'm just pointing out that this energy is available to all. Okay. Uranus also does very much relate to technology. And one of the things that we have been seeing, as Pluto has had this kind of, ongoing, with various degrees of closeness, relationship with Uranus, there is plenty of tech being built up and pushed forward. And some of it is very much in service of the status quo. And some of it is very much in service of the rich and powerful. Okay. Surveillance cameras, for example, all over our cities. Okay. And again, those are tools that can be used for good or ill. There is no guarantee of them being used for either one. Right? Okay. So now, with this huge cluster of planets in Aries, and having this relationship with both of those outer planets, and then, of course, Neptune, the third of the outer planets, that has been dancing with these other two. Okay. And, we've been seeing this, this minor grand trine has been going kind of, in and out of closer or further orb we're looking at, I think, like a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years at this point. It's been a while. So we've seen, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction sort of brought some of that to a head. Okay. As is very much the case when we're looking at mundane astrology, when we're looking at world astrology, a lot of the things that really fit the archetypes we're not going to know about until long after the fact when we're starting to, really assess, what happened in the history of this particular time, right? But we've got these personal planets hanging out there. And so that makes it much more personal for all of us. Okay. Yes, there's these larger patterns that we can see going on in the world around us. But for us as individuals, that Mercury and Mars in particular bring it home. Okay. Mercury brings it home through how are we communicating? Mars brings it home through how are we acting? And of course, Mars rules Aries. And so this huge pileup in Aries is all answering to Mars. Okay. And so if I really have to put a kind of summarize that action of Mars in particular here, it is, how do our actions define us? How do they determine who we are? Who we are isn't just who we say we are, though Mercury being there, there's going to be a lot of saying about who we are, right? But Mars is saying, it's all well and good to talk, but your walk needs to match your talk, right? So they're all heading toward a pileup with Saturn, a triple conjunction that it's occurring over the weekend of this upcoming weekend. I think the Mars-Saturn conjunction itself is on the 19th. And I don't quite remember when Mercury is actually exactly conjoining each of them in turn. But they will all it is a partile conjunction for all three. They are all at 7 degrees and change. Okay. At the time of that conjunction. So this new moon is leading into that, which kind of, gives it some extra juice. Okay. Remember that new moons bring our conscious and unconscious awareness together. Both our logical sense of the daytime world, our ability to perceive things clearly, and then the moon, our more embodied instinctual side. Okay. And the reason why new moons are this great, beginning point, an inception point for us to be able to harness that energy in doing things that we want to do is because having both our conscious and unconscious awareness acting together in the same way, puts them all on the same page, right? Makes it easier for us to get that impetus to go forward in that particular direction. But with this triple conjunction happening on the heels of that, that can be a whole lot of hurry up and wait. Okay. Mars is the unstoppable force. Saturn is the immovable object. Okay. And then Mercury, Mercury is the trickster, right? Can go either way, but particularly with a couple of malefics, Mars and Saturn are considered malefics. They do things in ways that humans find perhaps a bit challenging, right? It's not necessarily that they're truly bad. It's just that, they're used to doing things in a way that is not as fun, for example, as, say, Venus or Jupiter. Okay. But so Mercury hanging out with two malefics at the same time, Mercury is like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, what are we going to burn down today? Okay. And maybe something needs burning down, right? Maybe something needs a pause, a long pause before we actually go forward. Maybe something needs for us to, okay, it may not be fun for us to slam our head into a wall, but it certainly could wake us up. Okay.
Or knock
So,
you out.
or knock you out at a time when maybe you shouldn't be running around. Okay. So, Mercury with Mars and Saturn here, then Mercury is the enabler. And again, that can be good or bad. Okay. But Mercury does tend to speed things up in an already impulsive sign of Aries. And so we may have sudden starts and stops. We may have situations where it looks like, oh, things are going to be a go ahead. And then, oh, wait, there's something we completely forgot to consider. And now it's looming ahead of us and we have to deal with it because Saturn, right? Where Saturn is, those are the things we have to deal with. So, wherever all this Aries stuff is happening within, whether it's our individual charts or the charts of, of places, organizations, countries, okay, wherever that is the case, that's where we're going to have to address things head on, where we're going to have to face things. Aries rules the face, right? And it's a whole lot of things all at once. So that being the case, I would say during this week, but especially during this new moon, it would behoove us to do a little prep work in the sense of making sure that we have things like that we are well hydrated with all this stuff happening in a fiery sign, that we schedule extra time in between important tasks in case things go sideways, that we make sure that we allow extra time for rest, that we pace ourselves. And, for some of us, we may not notice much of this, as is the case with every single transit. Some of our charts get hit by it really very much in your face, and some of our charts barely notice it because it's happening in a place that doesn't really interact with much that's important in our lives. Okay. But it is important to remember that even if it's not affecting you directly, it's affecting someone around you directly. And that can have an impact. Neptune, of course, the presence of Neptune in all of this does bring concerns about our ability to perceive things clearly, brings ideology into the mix. Okay. Again, for better or for worse, but there is a strong potential for confusion with regard to that ideology. Okay. Neptune is currently conjoining the trans-Neptunian object binary that is Bora Sisi Pabu, named for a pair of creation deities who are they're from literature. Okay. So they are not real, quote unquote, right? Not even real in the sense of a long-standing mythology. And they are acknowledged as being not real. So they very much relate to kind of the comfortable lies that we tell ourselves. The things that we choose to believe, not because we believe them to be true, but because they are convenient or they help us, get through our day. Right? I I find that very interesting within the context of this minor grand trine in particular, because Uranus is currently conjoining the trans-Neptunian object Lempo, who is actually not even a binary, but I don't know quite what the proper terminology is for a triple. It's three bodies that orbit each other. And Lempo is named for a Finnish folkloric being or deity, but somebody who prior to Christianization was considered to be relatively pleasant, and afterwards became something of a devil figure. And I believe the name Lempo is actually like a mild cuss word in Finnish now. And so, Lempo astrologically relates to where belief gets warped, twisted, perverted, shifted from its original intention. Now you combine that with Borosisi, Pabu, okay, and we can see this kind of warping of belief. Questions about how is faith being used or misused institutionally? Okay. And again, as is the case for all of these, they don't. There is no guarantee that somebody we like is actually going to make good use of this. Okay. So, I think that one of the things that this lunation is really going to ask of us is that we pay attention to what ideologies we are identifying with, and how are they helping or hurting us, and how are they helping or hurting others we care about. I think that's a big factor. Yeah, that's where I'll leave it for now.
Well, that was great, and I really liked how you talked about, are we walking our talk?
Yeah.
Because, that could be a really good one to kind of meditate on or think about, to make adjustments to that so that you become more in alignment of walking your talk. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Figuring out how we are moving forward and what kind of person do we need to be to go down the path that we believe to be right, and is that actually a person we want to be? It it's really easy for us to say, oh, I've got this goal, I'm going to do this thing. But as we go through the process of committing ourselves to that goal, commitment, okay, as we go through the process of committing ourselves to that goal, if we find along the way that we're changing in the process into something we don't necessarily like, then it's time for a course correction. And that may well be what this Mercury-Mars-Saturn conjunction is all about, is that course correction. And to my mind, there is no shame in saying, you know what, that was not something leading me to be the kind of person I want to be. But now that I can see that maybe that was not such a good idea, I'm going to go in a different direction that is more aligned with who I wish to be. We are all in this process of like journeying and changing with our respective journeys.
I like that course correction. It's like if you're sailing a boat and the wind changes, you have to do a course correction. So
Yeah.
it's not good or bad, it just is. So it's like a good thing, I believe. So we have a few other aspects. Mercury is conjunct Neptune, which we talked about. Jupiter is trine Vesta. Neptune, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn are square Hygeia. And Mars and Saturn are quincunx the south node. So go ahead and talk about any that you'd like.
Okay. I do want to mention with that Mercury conjunct Neptune, that is, that's a sweet talker. And, while a sweet talker can certainly be nice to listen to on occasion, we have to ask ourselves, what does the sweet talker want? And is that something that we actually wish to go along with? This is definitely a time when, and especially in, Aries is not known for being sweet talking per se. It's more known for being kind of, blunt and maybe a bit aggressive, right? But, if you're in a situation where things look like, oh, there's some scary stuff going on, and somebody says, quick, come here, right? That would be a very Aries use of Mercury. But it is quite possible that maybe they don't know the right direction to go, or maybe they are intentionally deceiving us, right? So it pays to take a breath and not go off half-cocked, not go chasing something that looks good but isn't necessarily in alignment, again, with who we want to be. So there's that. Jupiter trine Vesta. Jupiter does relate to leadership. And I've talked before about how Vesta, goddess of hearth and home, goddess of the eternal flame, within the Roman tradition is also the hearth of the empire. And so, this combination of Jupiter trine Vesta does kind of put power in the hands of would-be leaders. That said, if you want to be a leader, you got to lead, right? And part of that leadership is in doing what inspires faith, what helps people to have hope, what helps people to believe in, whatever the cause is of a particular group. With Jupiter in Cancer, then there is, that sense of a strong potential for leaders to step up, but specifically within family and close-knit community groups. Okay. That's very different than, say, leaders on the world stage. Certainly, if a leader can convince everybody within their country that, we are all part of the same team, that's great, but it's a lot harder to do on that large scale. Okay. Especially with so many, outer planet influences being kind of disruptive about, what constitutes institutional power and liberty and, the belief system that we as a whole people want to abide by. So, while yes, this can favor the empire or country or what have you, I do really feel that with these, both of these bodies being in water signs and with Jupiter being in Cancer, that it's a lot closer to home. That it is not as much in favor of the larger social order as it is of the close to home. What are the things that that help us as local communities to gather together and strengthen each other and support the members of our community, the members of our families. So, that Aries pile-up square Aya. Aya has moved back into Cancer, squaring off against all that stuff in Aries. Okay, yes, like I just said, that Jupiter in Cancer leadership is great for local communities and families, but that doesn't mean there won't be conflict there. Okay. There may be some mouthiness when we're gathering together to try to figure out how to solve some problems. Okay. There may be some discord. There may be simple limitations of exhaustion. Aya is in a sign ruled by the moon. The moon is in Aries, conjoining Chiron and Eris. And so we may really want to be able to connect with others. We may really want to be able to do the things that are going to help our families and our communities, but we may simply not have the spoons for it. We may not have the energy. We may be, some of us may be really, struggling with the exhaustion that comes from living in interesting times. And so again, this is that reminder to pace ourselves, to be as kind as we can be to our own bodies and our own minds. The better to not lash out at others. The better to not, have our personal considerations bump up harshly against those of our friends, our family, our community. That Saturn, Mars being quincunx's south node, it's funny. I don't often look at things like quincunxes to the nodes in particular. I really don't normally pay too much attention to any aspects to the nodes other than conjunctions or squares. Right. In large part because the nodes are they're empty points in space. There's not a planet there, right? At the same time, if we had something like a yod, for example, I would be hard pressed not to pay attention to it. And technically we kind of do, after I'm looking at it, because of that Pluto.
Yep.
Yeah. So I can't really ignore this quincunx from Mars and Saturn to that south node. It is really part of Yod. We just don't have the other quincunx showing there. And so that then, points to the south node, where the south node, it's interesting. There's a couple of different ways of looking at it that I think really factor in here. Because on one hand, the south node is where we come from karmically, and the north node is where we are going to karmically. It is the lessons we are learning in this life. Okay. And so there can be this kind of attitude of, well, this is where we should be letting go of things. So we don't want to stay stuck in South Node stuff. But South Node stuff is also where we have really developed our skills in previous lives or in previous iterations of this life. It is where we can be most comfortable and sometimes get stuck in that comfort. But it can also be our superpowers. But anytime we're looking at quincunxes, there is this challenge to balance the two ends of the quincunx. And if we're looking at a yod, then there is this this pressure on us within this place where we have been comfortable. And so I think that really drives home the sense of it's time to wake up. That it is time for some course correction. But that course correction does not require that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. It does not require that we, abandon where we have skill and expertise. And I think, unfortunately, that has been that has been something of a hallmark of the past couple of years, that there has been this tendency to say, wow, things really suck, and we want to get rid of the things that suck. But in the process, we've been tossing aside, people, ideas, institutions, etc., where there is expertise. Because we're like, oh, the experts haven't been doing it the way we want. All well and good, but if we simply strike out into territory that we do not know and have no comfort in and have no skills in, it's real easy for us to get lost. We have to have a sense of where we have been in order to know where we are going. And so I think that the Mars and Saturn quincunx to the South Node, but also this other one that's not quite as tight, from Pluto to the South Node, forming that yod, that is a reminder to pay attention to where we have been, but not allow ourselves to get stuck there. And so it has that seesaw quality of the quincunx. And again, some of that stop and go kind of energy that we see anytime we've got Mars, Saturn in particular, but especially with this in that quincunx relationship with the South Node.
Just another indication of a course correction a little bit there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all of your insight. That's been wonderful. And we're going to go on to the lunar phase family or gestation phase. It uses the 4 lunar phases. Pessin discovered that these phases can play out in 9-month intervals. So the new phase for 9 months and the first quarter for 9 months and so forth. And so we're starting a new phase with this Aries new moon, and we'll continue to the first quarter in January of 2027 at 25 degrees Aries, and then the full phase will be October 15th of 2027 at 21 Aries. And then the third quarter phase will be July 14th of 2028 at 22 degrees Aries. And it's kind of fun sometimes to play along with these and see how they progress, because sometimes from new moon to new moon, it's about 4 weeks. We don't accomplish everything. And then I like to look at the yearly one also. So we have like 3 lunar phases to work with. So the yearly one We're beginning the new moon phase here on April 17th, and then the Aries full moon will be September 26th this year at 3 degrees Aries. So, lots of times what's starting or beginning will work out in one of these 3 lunar phases. I want to thank our audience for joining us. I want to thank Simon for joining me as always. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and I appreciate all your insight that you share with us.
It's a pleasure
And,
to be here. Thank you.
and then all those that come and watch at a future date, thank you. We appreciate you. And then, Simon, I'm going to let you tell us about your Patreon page, please.
Thank you, Liz. So I do some writing about these astrological transits that I've been talking about. And I also create artwork in connection with those transits. Some of it you've seen here, mostly in the form of my digital work, but I also do a fair amount of traditional artwork, drawings in particular that are based in astrological transits. And I do some of those in the form of custom astrological art for my patrons in connection with particularly their solar return charts, but also some natal work as well. So if any of that sounds like it might be of interest to you, I'd love to see you there, have you join our little community there. And I'm also a consulting astrologer, like Liz is. And so if you wish to schedule a consultation with me, you can visit my website at iconalchemy.com.
And like Simon says, I do consultations. I have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and you're watching my YouTube channel. So please subscribe, leave a like, make a comment. We love to hear from you. And there's almost 200 shows in the archives now, which is great. And Simon's been on several with the Astrology Star Sisters. And then I have several other topics that we cover. And I do 1 or 2 shows a week and look forward to having you on the future and our audience joining us. And I want to thank Astro Peregrine Software, our sponsor, an astrology software for Mac and Windows. And you can find out more information at astroperegrine.com. So thanks again for joining me. I so appreciate it. And we're going to say goodbye for now and see you all next time. Goodbye, Simon. See you next time.